Morning, y'all. It's not an opinion, just a statement of fact here. Ken Klippenstein, if you don't know who he is, you need to follow him. He is doing some of the best reporting on the ground and in general throughout this entire time. And I wish that more mainstream news outlets would, if not pick up on his reporting, at least follow his lead. This is great for a morning story. ICE unloads. Immigration officers speak out. Fuck this. He wrote this on January 26, 2026. Best they can do is shoot the guy in the back? That's not the voice of some liberal commentator. That's what a Homeland Security officer told me this weekend, one of over half a dozen who have reached out to express their alarm over the killing of Alex Preddy in Minneapolis and beyond. I've listened to stories and the beefs of immigration officers in Minneapolis, across the country, and to a person, they all blame the shooter, one of their own. The major media is stuck on framing the killing of Alex Preddy as some national and partisan battle, highlighting Republicans breaking ranks, the NRA protesting, MAGA wavering, and Chuck Schumer doing whatever he's doing. But no one is really capturing what the federal law enforcement officers on the ground are thinking. The truth is, they're fed up, and have been for weeks. They paint a picture that is more police academy, or even Reno 911, than a Gestapo on the march. Yes, they agree that Washington is a huge problem and are uncomfortable with the mission creep that is taking them away from actual immigration enforcement. But internally, there's also a story of gung-ho 19-year-olds, drunken stakeouts, and senior officers disappearing into meetings and then all of a sudden needing some time off. Sounds about right. They are also frustrated with the narrative unfolding and the information war being waged from Washington, including the flamboyant defense of the shooting of Alex Preddy and the other controversial moves on the ground. As I support this administration, there needs to be more common sense in situations like this, not a knee-jerk damage control narrative that does not line up with the evidence on video, one Border Patrol agent said in a private chat group that was shared with me. This individual was shot 8 to 9 times while unarmed. We can't always support what happens just because it's one of us, he adds. An ICE agent was even more critical. Yet another justified fatal shooting, 10 versus 1, and somehow they couldn't find a way to subdue the guy or use a less than lethal, the agent said. They all carry belts and vests with 9,000 pieces of equipment on them, and the best they can do is shoot a guy in the back? Overall, as someone who has been covering this for months, I am struck by how angry Homeland Security officers are with their own agencies and their blunt dismissal of the Washington leadership. All of the immigration officers I've interviewed for this story spoke on the condition of anonymity. Sagging morale and declining standards are a constant theme I picked up, problems that these sources say have been festering long before the deaths of Preddy and Renee Good, the ones that very much contributed to these outcomes. More than one ICE agent in particular complained about how Washington's focus on labeling protesters as impeding federal functions, and thus breaking the law, and the vilification of Antifa and others labeled paid agitators, leftists, radicals, extremists, and terrorists is confusing the ranks while also distracting everyone from the immigration enforcement mission. I can go on, but overall it's been a ridiculous experience, one ICE agent told me. He says that many agents on the ground are just going along with the expanded mission because they are more interested in their away-from-home per diem pay and collecting overtime than what the actual mission is. Others express the cynicism typical of everyone who toils at the bottom of any bureaucratic food chain, poo-pooing rapid expansion of the ICE Army and shaking their heads over the ridiculous budget increases being fought for in Washington that will have no impact where they work. The brand new agents are idiots, one experienced ICE agent assigned to Homeland Security investigations told me. The same sentiment was echoed by virtually everyone I talked to, with several conveying the view that Preddy's death was the fault of some skittish young recruit who panicked when he heard the word gun, if that's what happened. Even one of the new ICE recruits agreed with the experienced agent's low assessment of the Trump freshman class. A lot of the guys, he said, referring to the new ICE recruits he worked alongside, are honestly pretty sketchy. The new ICE officer continued. I thought federal agents were supposed to be clean cut, but some of them pass around a flask as we're watching a suspect, observing as well that the new guys have some weird tattoos. Those tattoos, I'm told, are symbolic of the fact that the new recruits tend to be more ideologically motivated than those of the past. This problem is compounded by the fact, raised by several officers, that ICE is relying on volunteers to go to Minneapolis and other Democratic cities on these temporary deployments. Tends to favor new recruits and those who are chasing overtime. I mean, I like this kind of honesty, but it's kind of like a little bit of butt covering, isn't it? I mean, I mean, if you guys are good, if you're good people inside ICE and BDP, you need to start recording everything. You need to start taking notes about these people who are doing drugs or drinking on the job. That's what you need to be doing to cover your ass when the time comes. You also need to have some kind of body camera so you can cover your ass when the time comes, because the time is coming. On passing around a flask, because I actually believe it. These people are out of control. Violence is casual. Slamming the butt of a gun into a 16-year-old's head who had his hands up? That kind of violence it's routine to whoever the fuck these people are. Unclear how these task forces are organized in cities like Minneapolis, or indeed who is in charge and in control. But those who I've interviewed agree that the tide is turning, that some agencies like the FBI are increasingly no-shows in the field, and others are expressing a reluctance to participate in non-immigration missions. Last I've heard, says one ICE officer, the FBI didn't want to help us out much anymore, especially in Minneapolis, due to the bad press. Another branch of ICE, Enforcement and Removal Operations, ERO, is being squeezed heavily to serve on the streets against protesters, the officer says, adding that a lot of the guys are totally exhausted out there with a lot of pressure on them to conduct non-immigration missions. The bravado of an uncompromising operation and the absolute support Washington expresses for the shooters, there are signs that the Trump administration is growing worried about the public and bipartisan backlash. President Trump today posted an unusually conciliatory statement on Truth Social. Governor Tim Walz called me with the request to work together with respect to Minnesota. It was a very good call, and we actually seem to be on similar wavelengths. Remember that? That's a very different tone than the one adopted by his Homeland Security advisor, Stephen Little Bitch Miller, who asserted shortly after Preddy's death that the intensive care nurse, who actually was a federal government employee, was a domestic terrorist. White House Press Secretary K.K. Caroline Leavitt asked today if Trump agrees with Miller. She said, I have not heard the president characterize Mr. Preddy in that way. Good news, bad news consequence of a new reluctance on the ground in Minneapolis, one officer told me. The good news is that leadership is disappearing into urgent legal meetings, increasingly worried about the possibility that they will oversee similar killings. Threat briefings are now focusing on retaliatory threats, and now they're scheduling more with contracted DHS attorneys tomorrow and the next day. I know managers got called into meetings all night. As the meetings are held, ICE agents and others I've talked to say the government versus terrorist narrative is having tangible and negative impacts on the ground. Lots of people are freaking out, one ICE agent told me. Agents are getting seriously paranoid, afraid of being targeted by retaliators. Several agents described receiving briefings about retaliatory threats to ICE inspired by the Minneapolis shooting. Guys, take it real serious, like we're fighting insurgents, as if Minneapolis is Baghdad, an officer said. Through all the federal agents I've spoken to this weekend support immigration enforcement, they indeed see the Minneapolis operation as something else entirely. An open-ended counterinsurgency in a faraway land and an out-of-touch leadership in Washington more concerned with optics than immigration. Group chats and agents said this is a no-win situation for agents on the ground or immigration enforcement. Ken Klippenstein for such a wonderful morning story. I mean, I'm not sure where that leaves us because Stephen Miller and Washington are out of touch. But we need to keep up what we're doing because it is making a difference.